I've got a problem.
Oh, yeah?
Having uncomfortable thoughts about Jeep Wranglers.
Oh.
You just need to come up here where it's cold, and it'll convince you not to buy only half a car.
It's like 30 degrees here and snowing right now. I don't want to hear your lip about how we don't have winter.
And you just want to be driving around with no roof and no doors.
No roof, no doors, no stability, no quality.
No safety.
Yeah, definitely no safety.
It's got a roll cage, for Christ's sakes. How are you going to tell me no safety?
Yeah, so if you get T-boned in that, I'm sure the roll cage will save you.
No, the doors will. Oh, wait.
Yeah, there's a reason they had to add a roll cage, because it rolls over if you like breathe on it funny.
Oh, come on. That's what stability control's for. This computers solve us from physics. Anyway, I think I want a Wrangler, and that's probably a problem. It's either that or a Golf R, so save me from myself.
Of all the vehicles that you have lusted after for a week here and there, I think a Wrangler is actually one of the less offensive ones.
No, it's pretty offensive.
It's still not a good vehicle.
It's either that or a Golf R. So, John, what would you have me have between a Wrangler and a Golf R?
Easy, Golf R. No contest.
Yeah, if those are your choices, I'd go with John on that.
Yeah, if those are the only two choices, it's not a choice at all.
I mean, a Wrangler, I think, is a better choice than your weird Cadillac rectangle thing and your SUV dreams. But I think...
No, I think the Cadillac is better than the Wrangler, too. Like, I'm trying to think of a worse car, and all I'm coming up with is one of those giant four-door luxury pickup trucks.
Yeah, those are well, but at least those have a little more function than a Wrangler.
No, it's about the same. They're both ridiculous things.
Also, so that reminds me, DeMuro did a review of, what was it, the G65, an AMG G65? I think that's right. I might have that wrong. So it's a twin-turbo V12 G-Wagon. And
I believe it's pronounced Gwagon.
Gwagon, yeah. I was not prepared for that. So he did a video on the Gwagon, and it gets better every time I say it. He did a video on the Gwagon, and he hated it. Okay, so fine. All right, so how about this? I don't have the money for a Quadrifoglio, but how about that or Golf R or Wrangler? What would you have, John?
Quadrifoglio over the Golf R, even though it's uglier.
God, you're so wrong.
I've seen them in real life now. I saw a white one the other day. I thought of you.
It does not look good in white. Holy shit.
It doesn't look good in any color, but like this, I've seen enough of them now that I know it's not just like, oh, maybe it looks weird in pictures, but it looks good in person. I don't like it anywhere. I don't like it in pictures. I don't like it in a box. I don't like it with a fox.
John, I love you, but you are so wrong about this.
No, I just don't like how that car looks. But it's a good car for while it's working.
Well, yeah, for the 10 minutes it's working.
Yeah, and we don't even know. Maybe like the reliability could be fine. It's too new. Like this is the new Alpha, but we'll see.
No, it's not. Look, here's your new rule, Casey. New rule. If you're going to get something fun and fast, unless it is made by a Japanese company, lease it.
Yeah. Well, what is fun and fast that's made by a Japanese company? That's also at least mildly affordable. So, like
the Toyota Baru would be.
It's
fun.
Not fast.
Not fast.
It is fun. No. It is not fast. You know, you got a GTR, which is too much money. And that's it. That's all you got. Maybe.
No, the NSX is fun and fast.
It's unaffordable.
That wasn't one of your criteria. You're going to lease it. You're going to lease the NSX. It'll be fun.
Oh, come on. All right. Let's say, even though this is over my budget, let's say for the sake of discussion, $50,000. So for $50,000, what do you get that's Japanese, fun, and fast?
I don't know.
I rest my case.
I'd take a Miata.
Not fast. Fun.
Not fast.
I mean, look, a Wrangler's not fast either. But you find fun in it for other reasons. To me, a Miata would be a better version of that.
Plenty of fun. Yeah, that's a good midlife crisis car for you after your second child is in third grade.
Yeah, that's fair. But no, I'm serious. So, I mean, my options are a Civic Type R, which means I would need to install a paper bag in the car to wear over my head every time I drove it.
No, they won't let you buy one. You're over 25. That's it.
That was...
Fair point. I've heard the Type R is phenomenal to drive, but it is so unabashedly, truly hideous to look at.
You can get it in black, maybe try to hide all the wings and ducks and scoops.
Maybe that's the answer, is just take the wing off, like do a wing delete, if you will.
It's all wing. You take the wing off, you're just left with the chassis. That's it. The entire body of that car is a wing or a scoop.
I would imagine there must be some kind of marketing differentiation here at work where like they have to make the Civic R so hideous that it won't detract from sales of the NSX from older people with taste.
Maybe, but the regular Civic is kind of gross too. Like I think they just had a styling fart on this whole generation, which is a shame because this is a great generation of Civics. Like they're getting great reviews. People say they're great cars.
Yeah.
So much so that a lot of the best parts of it are showing up in the Accord, but the styling is rough. Styling's rough.
I mean, if you think about it, all kidding aside, I mean, you can get a Wrangler spec to like 40 or 45 grand or something like that, which is truly absurd.
No,
However,
you can get a Wrangler spec to 40. I would never. I would not go near that.
This is getting into the $80,000 pickup truck territory. Yeah. $50,000 Jeep Wrangler. Great. That makes perfect sense. Good job, America.
So hold on, Jeep.com. I wonder how. See, I thought I was trying to move on. Now I've brought myself right.
Someone in the chat room even pointed out like the Wrangler with like leather straps for door handles, but television screens on the backs of the seats. Like that is a car that has lost its way.
Wait, honest question. Are the back seats in a Wrangler, like, is there actually enough depth there that...
That's where you got to keep your 17 friends when you go surfing.
Wow.
They go in the back seats, quote unquote.
Right.
They're seats. Even in the coupe, they're seats.
Well, even the front seats aren't seats. It's like, a bunch of boards with a piece of vinyl stretched across it.
When was the last time you were in a Wrangler, John? I'm so over you right now.
Is anyone ever really in a Wrangler, or are they just on it?
Oh, my God. I hate you, John. Why do you do this to me? Why do you do this? Why are you so mean?
See, nobody ever wants to hear me talk about fancy snow tires on my fancy Tesla, but everybody wants to hear you talk about your terrible car ideas of getting this cheap, crappy car.
We have like an intervention of Casey. Casey is like is too suggestible when it comes to like he has like a car-shaped hole in his life, mostly filled with like BMW repair bills, and he's very susceptible to like maybe this will fill it, and just anything like Jeep Wrangler, like the Trackhawk.
Something do this for me, anything.
Yeah, and so I don't know, but just like he runs across the wrong ad or the wrong YouTube video, and just he's like, you know what I should get? A Winnebago. That's next. I mean, that's his next thing. Is going to be like, why not?
Why?
Whole family could go on vacation. We could live in it. We'll need to sell our house to afford it.
My parents briefly had like a little tiny, RV, and I am still a little upset that they got rid of it.
I was joking, but there it is.
Yep. See? That's the seed, and that seed will grow in your mind until maybe 3 years from now.
$41,235 for a new Wrangler. Holy shnikes!
Why? Just why? At that point, why? Like there are so many better things in every way.
So, tell me what. Okay,
2 Honda Civics.
So
I would rather drive 2 Honda Civics than a Wrangler.
Like one in a different color. Like right. Just alternate. The excitement of having 2 cars that you rotate.
Actually,
it's like raid 1 for cars. If one car has a repair, it's so much less annoying. If only you could drive both of them to the dealership at the same time.
Actually, I don't think I would need to go quite that bananas. I think I can.
Yeah,
back
that's the
down.
problem. You never actually need to go.
Apparently, the Magic Keyboard with numeric keypad is bendy, and I guess that's something we're supposed to be upset by, because I tell you what, when I get a new keyboard, the first thing I do is a bend test to make sure it's not bendy.
No, not bendy. You didn't read the link.
No,
not bendy like if you put it in your pocket and sit on it, it'll bend like an iPhone 6. But there's 2 kinds of reports. One kind is I opened up the box on my brand new Magic Keyboard with numeric keypad, which is a hell of a product name. I don't know if that's the official name, but you know what I'm talking about. And I took it out of the box and put it down on the desk in front of me, and it's bent, like it's warped. It wobbles, like, you know what I mean? So that's no good. That's just like, manufacturing defect, or
sure.
Maybe it got bent in transport or something like that. But the second strain of this kind of story is I got a new Magic Keyboard, took it out of the box, it was fine, typed on it for a week, and apparently the force of my typing bent it in the middle. If you're going to put only little pads or feet on 4 corners of a very long keyboard, and it's so thin that it bends in the middle from the force of typing, that is a pretty big failure for the functionality of a keyboard. Now, your beloved Magic Keyboard that you have without a numeric keyboard maybe has a short enough wheelbase, so to speak, that having the little feet on the corners doesn't make it bend in the middle, or maybe you should just not look at your keyboard to see if it's bent in the middle. But anyway, we'll link to this MJ Size webpage that has a collection of all of this information. If it's a manufacturing defect, it kind of makes me feel better. It's like, oh, they'll fix the manufacturing defect. But if it's actually the case that the mere act of typing on the keyboard bends it, that's pretty bad.
We are sponsored this week by Fracture, who prints vivid color photos directly on glass. Visit fracture.me and save 15% off your first order with code ATP17. you should get photos printed sometimes, because they not only do they make great gifts, but even just for yourself, they help you keep those memories alive. They help you capture those moments and keep them around, keep you seeing them, because otherwise they fall off your Instagram timeline or your Facebook river or whatever it's called, and you never see them again. And so with actual photo prints, you can have these physical objects representing these memories in your life, and they are just wonderful. Fracture prints are these edge-to-edge prints on pieces of glass. You don't need to frame them, and they're lightweight. They're very thin pieces of glass, so you don't have to worry about like this giant heavy thing like falling off the wall and crashing down. Like that never happens. They're way too lightweight for that. It's just these wonderful, practical, and very nice looking glass prints of your photos. And they make fantastic gifts, especially now for the holidays. These are all human-made prints, handmade in Gainesville, Florida. They, around the holidays, can occasionally get backed up. So you want to get those holiday orders in right now, because you're running out of time, really. Get those orders in now so that these wonderful people in Florida can make your prints. Ordering is simple. It comes with everything you need right in the box. There's a money-back guarantee if anything goes wrong, although I've never seen anything go wrong. Fracture prints are great. They make great gifts, but just hurry up and order them for the holidays, because you're really, really running low on time here. Visit fracture.me and save 15% off your first order with code ATP17. Thank you so much to Fracture for sponsoring our show.
Let's do a little bit of Ask ATP. Paige Hilliard writes in, is there any way the three of you could come up with a list of realistic things that you would like to have as holiday gifts, even if some of you already have them? Helpful hints would be greatly appreciated, and potentially opening up your website to sell t-shirts or gear year-round would be even more appreciated. So the bad news is that Paige's spouse or what have you is probably going to be listening to the show, and so Paige, now you can't use any of these ideas because we're now giving them away. However,
you assume we have useful ideas.
That's also fair. I was thinking about this on and off most of today. I try to every year, and I did not do it this year. I try to every year do a like holiday roundup of here's a bunch of different gifts that I recommend at all sorts of different price points. And so I'll put in the show notes the last couple of years of these posts. And they're just stuff I like. Sometimes it's board games. Sometimes it's stupid. It's like cables or something dumb like that. But this year I didn't do it mostly because I didn't feel like I had that many new and interesting ideas. So I'm missing out on that sweet, sweet affiliate money. But my priority is to do a post that I think is useful before it is make a few bucks on affiliate money. So that's why I didn't write it. The only thing I can come up with that I think is useful is for those of us with new phones, a Qi charger seems like a pretty good answer. Now, you would have to figure out, would your partner want a stand-up Qi charger, say, for at a desk, or would they want a lay-down Qi charger, say, for like at a nightstand? But that seems to me to be a pretty good option and a pretty safe option for anyone that has an iPhone 8 or newer.
I have a hard time with this because I am very hard to shop for, as everyone in my family always complains about right around this time of year. And when I do think of something that I actually want, I just buy it immediately and don't give anyone else a chance to buy it for me. Or sometimes the things that I want are too expensive that I would feel comfortable asking for as a gift. So it's kind of a hard topic, especially because we don't know anything about this person really. So that's, like if they like coffee, I can tell you lots of coffee gear that could be useful. I've written it up on my site a few times. So like Casey, I didn't do anything with any kind of gift guide this year, but coffee equipment, kitchen equipment in general, for whatever they like to do, that's always, interesting gift ideas. But it's really hard without knowing anything else. I can think of kind of like a greatest hits kind of thing, like just stuff that everyone seems to enjoy. And certain kitchen gadgets fit this requirement, I think, pretty well. Certain ones are things like having like a really nice pair of gloves for the winter is always like good for Christmas. I enjoy having a really nice flashlight. There's a line of flashlights by the brand Phoenix with an F-E-N-I-X, that I really enjoy that just use like 2 AA batteries, and you can get smaller, bigger ones. But the 2 AA ones, I think, are the best size to weight balance. They're just super nice LED flashlights. That's just kind of like a pleasant thing to have around. Your mention of the Qi charging mats is really good. The Mophie one that the Apple Store sells is excellent. I've tried a few other ones now. I actually just got in the Grove made one. Those just came today. I have not yet actually used it beyond just 5 seconds to test it out because it's going to be my nightstand charger, and I haven't gone to bed yet. So, but it looks really nice, and it's very well built. It's pretty big, but pretty well built, pretty nice. And yeah, just there's all sorts of stuff. Like I like having a really nice backpack. I have a backpack from Briggs and Riley, which is a fancy luggage company. They make fantastic luggage, which is why I got their backpack, and I just love that. It's so delightful to have that. Any kind of like certain people, myself included, like having nice leather goods. So like like a leather laptop case, maybe something like that. Like that's that kind of stuff. But I mean, this stuff, this is so like kind of general purpose. I like having really good travel mugs. Zojirushi makes a really nice travel mug that I really, really like. I don't really know. It's really hard to know like how to be more specific than this. But those are all nice things.
Yeah, hearing you talk gave me a couple of other ideas. One of the best investments I've ever made was what I call my Go Pack, which is really just a collection of cables and whatnot that are basically duplicates of anything I would need to charge any of my devices and a couple other miscellaneous bits. So, if I ever go overnight anywhere, I just grab this bag that has all of my chargers in it always. They never ever leave that bag unless they're, in a hotel being used or whatever. And I don't have to, remove my entire installation from my bedside table or anything like that, pack it up and then reassemble it when I get back home. It is just everything in duplicate. And I've written a couple of blog posts about that. And so I'll put a link to that in the show notes. It can get pretty spendy depending on what you want. I think I spent like $200 on mine. And I'm not talking about the bag itself. I'm talking about all the bits inside. But I have a couple of fairly expensive things that I find very useful that most normal humans probably wouldn't. And then additionally, hearing you talk about did you say Briggs and Riley backpack? I happen to adore anything that Tom Bin makes. That's TOMBIHN. It's maybe a little late to order it for this holiday season, unless you are on the West Coast because they're Seattle based, but pretty much anything Tom Bin makes, I adore. And I highly recommend that as much as Marco seems to highly recommend Briggs and Riley as well. So just a couple other quick thoughts that Marco made me think of.
Oh, wait, one more thing also. I came up with something more specific in the kitchen category. I have gotten as gifts for other people in the past my favorite kitchen thermometer, which is the ThermoWorks ThermoPen Mark IV. If you have any need for a kitchen thermometer, and if you ever do anything in the kitchen ever, you do. Even if you don't think you need one, you need one. And once you have one, you will use it for lots of things. Every kitchen should have a thermometer and a scale. And the scale, you can get pretty much any cheap garbage. It doesn't really matter. The thermometer, they actually matter quite a bit. There's pretty big variations in quality and accuracy and speed and everything else. What you want is the ThermoPen Mark IV from ThermoWorks. It runs about $70 usually if you find a good sale. I think it's about $90 if it's not on sale. This is the one that, like, if you see like on Top Chef, if you ever see anybody using a kitchen thermometer, it is probably this one. There's a reason for that. It's awesome. This is like I was going to say the Cadillac of thermometers, but Cadillacs aren't that great anymore, are they? This is the Tesla of thermometers. Like this, it's really, really nice.
Course.
Yeah, it's great. Generally, and like I mentioned Phoenix earlier with the LED flashlight thing, and those are like $50. So these aren't cheap, but it's really nice if you're the kind of person who values quality and nice things, which almost everyone is about something. It might not be about the same things that you or I are, but almost everyone can appreciate quality in something. And it's really nice when you can find something like this in a category where like pretty much everything else in the category is kind of mediocre garbage. And if you can figure out what's like the one really awesome thing in that category, even if it's a little bit ridiculously priced, that kind of thing makes a good gift, because it's the kind of thing where like people who receive it can probably appreciate something really awesome like that, but because it's expensive and or obscure, they might not ever know about it, or they might not feel justified spending the price for it. So that's the perfect kind of thing that makes a great gift, is like, I wouldn't have bought this for myself, but I really appreciate having it.
Yeah, I do agree that is one of the best gifts. Oh man, this is great, but I'm so glad I didn't spend the money on it. That is the sweet spot. John, we've delayed you far too long. What are your thoughts?
I reject the premise of this question, which is that we should list things. We should list things that we like because people who listen to the show will like the same things that we like. I mean, we can try to list things that we like, even if we already have them. Like that is one task. But the second part of this is for those of us who are partnered with ATB fans. The idea being that if we list things that we like, that people who like the show will also like those same things. And I don't think that's true. Like just because that means we like them. Everyone who listens to the show is not like us, hopefully. So, yeah. And also, I'm terrible at giving gifts. So even if I had good ideas for gifts, you shouldn't listen to me. So
that's very helpful. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and I put this question in there, and I basically put it in just to say, can you come up with a list of blah? And the answer for me is no, I can't. I cannot do that because I don't think I should. I don't think it makes sense. And even if it was phrased so it does make sense, I'm bad at that. So I'm glad you two filled in.
Paige, just let you and your partner know that Marco and I are your favorites, and John is useless.
Yeah, to ask like, what do you ask for? I'm not as bad as Marco in that I don't immediately buy everything that I want, but when people ask me what they should get me, my answer is always nothing, which is probably the worst thing you can say to someone who wants to get you a gift. So I'm just terrible all around when it comes to gift stuff.
Yeah, honestly, I would love to get to the point with the family where like maybe we just get gifts for the kids, right? Like that seems like a better way to do it. But I think this is the kind of thing like many adults want this outcome, but it's very hard to get families to agree to that.
We're getting close. Like we should have like a big family map of like how far like we've successfully spread the only gifts for kids thing. We've gotten pretty far. There's only a few holdouts left.
Oh my word. All right, moving on. Rob Fiorendino writes, how do you feel about your code or your apps after you've written them? Are they more like your children or your tools out in the shed? I will speak for myself and say any code that I've written more than 3 days ago is always garbage, and any code I've written in the last 3 days is often garbage. John?
I'm not sure, like, with the children or tools thing, I'm not sure, like, what Rob is getting at there. You can take it lots of different ways. Like, tools in your shed or children, like I don't know. Anyway, I'll just tell you how I feel about my code because I don't understand that part of it.
I think he's just saying, is it disposable and you're like, yeah, whatever, or is it, oh, this is my creation that I've labored for and it is perfect in every possible way.
I mean, like you said, Casey, it really depends on the timeline. Sometimes you write code and as soon as you're done writing it, you just hate it, but it's like you just got to do what you got to do because it's work, right? Other times you can be mildly satisfied with it, but there's really no such thing as far as I'm concerned as code that I write that I can look back on in the long term and not see all the terrible problems with. Like a couple of years down the line, no matter how incredibly happy you are with something, I always do see what's really wrong with it. If only because if that code lives on, like if you're aware of its existence, it probably means that it's still in use, which means that it has to be modified to account for, the changes of reality. Like, things change and you have to modify and augment your code to do new things. And inevitably you get to the point where you are modifying your code in ways that you did not anticipate when you wrote it. And nothing makes code uglier and makes you more annoyed with it than trying to change it in ways that it wasn't meant to be changed. Like you never thought things would change along this axis, or you always thought this bedrock assumption would be true and the entire system was built around it. Then that bedrock assumption is not true and you're just like, oh God, do I rewrite the whole thing? How can I change it? Is it too much? And then so you just feel bad about it. So it's mostly the more time goes on and the more it has to change, the more bad I feel about it.
Marco?
Pretty much all my old code, I look at it as, yeah, this is just garbage and it's a burden. Like I love deleting code. I love when a library comes around that removes the need for some code I've written that I can just delete my code and use the library, or new APIs from Apple and those come out and stuff like that. I code to accomplish something else. Like I code to build a product. The actual code, I take very little joy in, like, is it beautiful or elegant or interesting or clever? Like, I take no joy in any of that. So I write code and immediately, even as I'm writing it, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to have to maintain this. I don't want to have to do this crazy thing. Like, but it's all to accomplish the end. So basically, immediately after my code is written, I don't like it, and I just try to move on if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a slightly snarky answer in saying everything I've written I hate, and that is only slightly snarky. I mean, I really do feel that most of the time. But all kidding aside, in my entire career, and I've been doing this for, like 13 years now, I think there have been probably 5 or less like blocks of code. I don't mean that as like 5 lines. I mean like projects maybe is a better way of phrasing it. There have been like 5 or less projects wherein I've written some code and thought to myself, you know what? That was really solid. And I did something really good and or clever there. And usually clever is bad when it comes to code, but occasionally it can be good. And so I think, all kidding aside, probably 5 times or less in my career, I've looked back and said that was good work. Everything else is either, well, it didn't immediately turn into a fireball, so I consider that, job well done.
Marco has the advantage that no one else is telling him to change his product in ways that he didn't anticipate it changing, because he's the one who decides how it's going to change. And if anyone has any kind of idea how it might change in the future, it's him, because he's going to be, and it's not like he's saying he predicts everything, but he never has someone coming and saying, you should add this feature that flies in the face of your entire internal design of your application. Even if he has the notion to do that, he's not forced to do it on an abbreviated timeline or like all sorts of like the pressures of a real job that forces you to do things.
Except when the iPhone 10's coming out and you got to make the release date.
Yeah, right. But that's like that's more like just that's what your entire job is using someone else's APIs. You don't write UI kit. You're rolling with the punches of Apple's platform. You're writing on top of a platform. Everyone has that same thing. If you're writing, whatever, you're writing on top of a framework, and that framework changes. You got to, roll with those punches too. But I'm saying for like the things that your actual product does. So I think it makes you feel worse when you have to change your thing in a way that it was never meant to be changed, and you have to do it ASAP. And, whether you think it's a good idea or not, it has to happen. That does like the worst damage to even code that you feel like, was arranged in a reasonable way and designed in a reasonable way. You have to go in there and basically like injure it. And scar it and make it uglier, and just makes you want to just never look at it again and tear it all down and start over. And
I know those feels all too well. Now, one of my favorite pastimes on the show is to bag on Marco for not having a job. However, in Marco's defense, I have to stand up for Marco on this one. I feel like just in the last few days, Marco, and I don't know how much of this you want to talk about on the show, so I'm going to be a little cagey about it, but just in the last few days, you had maybe not an emergency, but a oh crap moment where some external force forced you to do a whole bunch of things and write a whole bunch of code that it seemed like if you were planning on doing it at all, it was going to be long in the future. And so I do think, John, you're usually right, but it just so happens that it seems like, Marco, you've just gone through this recently. So how do you feel about that code, whether or not you want to discuss the motivations behind it?
I'm happy to talk about it. So the code you're referring to is Overcast handling permanent feed redirects or feed changes for podcasts. Basically, the way I built the Overcast crawling infrastructure and database is that feeds are keyed uniquely on URLs, so that every feeds map one-to-one to URLs, and those URLs really can't and shouldn't change in the feed. Like if you have a new URL, it gets a new feed entry, and then episodes are represented as feed items, and feed items are keyed based on their feed ID. Plus, then, a bunch of random numbers based on, hashing their contents and then their GUID and stuff. And so, once you have feeds and feed items matched to a certain feed URL, it's not trivial to then move those subscribers to a different feed URL because all the item IDs for everything they have subscribed to will be different. And I can't easily change, I can't just, modify the ones that are on the old feed to point to the new feed without having lots of other problems and everything else. And also worth noting is that the feed items table is 170 gigs now. The table that maps users to feed items is also about 170 gigs. These are the two biggest and highest traffic tables in Overcast. It is very hard to modify these tables at all, to modify the schema, to add indexes, or to change the schema, to run alter tables on it. It pretty much can't be completed in any kind of real-time fashion. The only way to really change that would be to set up a whole new database as a replica, modify it, and then make it the new master. And that's just a lot of administration work, and it's risky. It involves downtime, and I hate doing it. And so all this is to say that for Overcast to modify what URL a feed entry points to is a big deal. And so since the beginning of Overcast, the way it handled redirects was, in HTTP terms, it treated them all as 302s, temporary redirects. So if it encountered a redirect, it would follow it when crawling the feed, but it would never update the source URL to point to a new one if it encountered a 301 code, which is the permanent redirect code. This works on the web, because on the web, it's pretty common practice that if you host a website at a certain domain name or a certain path, and you change your URL scheme or you move hosts, it's kind of known on the web that you're supposed to set up a redirect pretty much indefinitely. That it is a bad idea to ever change a URL without having a redirect in place, because then you're losing all your search engine ranking and your inbound links from other places and everything else. It's kind of understood as a best practice on the web that you don't break redirects ever. So on the web, a permanent redirect is much less important to be treated as such, because you can just always crawl one of the URLs that something used to be at, and if it's been properly maintained, it will get you to where the feed is, where the new one is. Podcasting doesn't work that way in practice. So all this time when I've been doing, basically treating this like the web, where I just kind of assume that if I follow a redirect, it'll always be there. In podcast, a lot of podcasters, first of all, aren't web programmers. A lot of podcast producers, and they come from the media world. There's also all sorts of podcast hosting and analytics and advertising platforms out there that all want to host your feed for you at their domain, and are all selling their services quite successfully to big podcasters. And the big podcasters, to them, their entire world is iTunes. And with iTunes, you don't have to maintain permanent redirects forever if you change your feed. You can just tell iTunes what your new feed URL is, and it will move for you for itself and for Apple Podcast subscribers. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. So the concept of having permanent redirects set up is, in practice, not known or not practiced by most podcasters. They are happy to move their feeds to anyone else's service, anyone else's domain, whatever new ad tracking insertion platform they're using this 6-month period. They'll move it all the time, and they don't consider what web programmers would consider is necessary for that. So I could sit here as much as I want and try to blame them and say, well, this is your problem, not mine. But the reality is, it becomes my problem. It is definitely my problem, and I'm the one who needs to fix it and find a solution, because what happens is when a big podcast moves, about a year ago, This American Life moved their feed, and they broke the old redirect. And I suddenly had 80,000 people telling me that their number one podcast was broken in Overcast. And this was bad. So it became my problem, very much so. At the time, I didn't have any kind of infrastructure in place to move subscribers between feeds in a way that wouldn't just break everything. And This American Life has another problem where they don't keep their back feed going. They only keep the most recent handful of episodes in the feed. Once something is older than a few weeks old, you can't download it anymore. You have to. I think they sell them, or you can get them in their app or something. But you can't download them out of the regular feed anymore. So if I move people over to a new entry that doesn't have all those back catalog episodes for This American Life, that's a pretty big problem, especially for that show, because it's so popular. And a lot of times people will save episodes for months at a time. They'll save up a big back catalog so they can either go back and re-listen, or they'll save it up for long car trips or whatever else. So there's all these very, very fragile conditions in which I have to be very careful what I do to handle redirects, if anything. And my original plan up until now of just not handling them was breaking down pretty badly. The driving factor this past week was that, which is what Casey was alluding to, The New York Times podcast, The Daily, is very, very popular. The Daily moved their feed. Overcast didn't take the redirect. And the old feed wasn't redirecting to the new one. I was hearing about it from a lot of people. And eventually we worked it out, and they arranged to put that redirect in place. So that was a temporary patch, but ultimately this was kind of like one of the many wake-up calls that if I finally had it, was like, okay, I need to handle redirects. Also, like SoundCloud is falling apart, and it seems like they're probably not long for this world. So like, and a lot of podcasts are hosted there, so there's gonna be a lot of feed moves there. And there's so many popular shows that are moving to different ad insertion platforms now and changing their feed address again. It's a big enough problem now that like any podcast crawling setup like this, it has to have a way to have permanent redirects. Like that's just the environment now. Too many popular shows move too often. You have to do it. So what I've been working on for the last week or so is permanent redirects and making it work. And it's really not good. Like the way I do it is really not good, but the only way I can do it without totally modifying my database schema and going through like sysadmin hell for weeks as I do that, not to mention lots of costs associated with that and possible bug potential. So I really don't want to do that. So what I do now basically is I have a separate process from the crawlers, because speaking of your old code, my crawlers are the only thing I have written in Go. And I haven't written really any Go since. So my Go skills are very rusty. And I look at the crawler code now, and it's so complex. Because it was, not only is it written in this language that I've used for nothing else, so like my skills are dull, but also it's like the first Go program I ever wrote. So it's not particularly great Go code. Like it's like me learning the language, and so like everything's in one big file, and it's kind of all over the place. And for me to track redirects there, I would have to modify the Go code. And I was trying to do that at first to solve a few other problems. I was just like looking at this like, I just want to set this on fire. Like, I have no idea what any of this does. I'm so scared to touch it because like it mostly has worked for a long time, and I don't want to touch it. But so instead, I made a separate process in PHP, my comfort language. I know it's bad. It's like comfort food. Like it's not good for you, but you know. Anyway, so I made a PHP separate queue that just once a day checks feeds for redirects. And if a feed is redirecting to the same place that is also an iTunes registered feed for more than, I think, 2 days, that's the threshold at, then it will take all the subscribers and basically create new entries for them in the new feed that match their entries in the old feed, and then delete the old feed subscription. So to the user, the only thing that appears to happen is all of a sudden the episodes for one of those shows that got moved, they all just re-download for some reason. Everything else is preserved, played, unplayed states, whether it's starred or not, progress if you're partially listening, that's all preserved because that just gets reinserted with the new IDs. But you do have to re-download because the client sees them as new entries. Basically, that's now in place. There's now this queue that runs those things. It's going through the backlog. It took way too long for me to do this. I'm glad I finally did it. I wish I had a slightly more elegant solution that wouldn't require re-downloading, but that would just be a lot more overhead. So I'm not going to do that yet. Maybe down the road if it becomes a big problem. And man, like once I had something actually checking for 301 redirects, and for the iTunes new feed URL tag, which is inserted, it's like what people who aren't familiar with podcasts, who just know web programming, this would make you cry. That like the way that you can redirect a feed for podcasts is you leave the old feed still there, returning a 200 response code, but you put an XML tag in the RSS feed that's iTunes new feed URL, and just leave that there for a few days, and iTunes picks it up and moves your feed for you.
Oh.
And then the old feed just can sit there, not getting new episodes added to it, or it can just get deleted and stop working. Like, that's how, I'm telling you, like, this is what I have to deal with. So it's like, again, like, the web programmer in me, when I started this whole thing, is like, I don't need to do that. That's terrible. No one's going to really do that. But no, people really do it, and at increasing frequency. And so anyway, once I had this redirect checking working, I was able to see quite how many very popular shows have had redirects since 2014 when I started crawling them. And it's a lot. Some of them are simple, like moving from HTTP to HTTPS. Like that's a very common one. Like all the relay shows did that. Lots of popular shows have done that. But a lot of them are just moving to different ad platforms and tracking platforms and insertion platforms and publishing platforms. And no one hosts their own feed in podcasting. So it's a mess out there. And so I had to deal with it, even though I really didn't want to. And I was so opinionated about, like, I don't need to do this. Like they should have redirects in place forever, but that's not the reality. And I had to, adopt to that because that's the industry I'm in.
So occasionally you have to do things and do them on the double because other people weren't thinking about you.
But it's not his boss telling him to do it, though. He's his boss. He's the one. He got to. The point is, he got to delay doing it for a really long time because he didn't want to.
Not with the daily though, right? And not with
not
American Life.
Not when very popular feeds redirect there.
Yeah, but I was saying, like, no one is forcing you to add an about screen that includes a car racing game to your thing, and you really don't have your display system. No one's making you support video podcasts if you don't want to. No one's deciding you have to have a recipe manager and a to-do list inside it. That's the type of thing.
We are sponsored this week by Hover, domain names for your passion. Go to hover.com/ATP to learn more and get 10% off your first purchase. Building your online brand has never been more important. Show the world who you are and what you're passionate about without tying it to a particular publishing platform or big email platform that happens to be popular this year or this 5 years, because that changes over time. And, my first email address was at juno.com. And when I bought marker.org in 2000, that was the last time I had to change my email address and tell anybody that, please update your address book. Nobody ever likes that. I also have hosted my own website at my own domain name since that time, because web hosts change, platforms change, social networks change, and it's always nice to have a domain for your home base, for what you tell people, to represent you online, for your email address, for your website. Have your own domain name. And if you're going to do that, you got to register it somewhere, and Hover is my favorite registrar. They have over 400 domain extensions, from the classics like .com, .net, .org, to all the new fun ones like .diamonds, .plumbing. There's no tricks or shady upsells or scammy add-ons or anything like that, and they respect your privacy by giving you free Whois privacy. They have great features to save you time, like Hover Connect for fast setup, or if you want fully advanced DNS control, they have that too. If you need any help at all, their customer support is top-notch. It's just a great place to register domains. I have almost all of mine there now, and I keep moving more there as time goes on because it's just pleasant. It's there when I need it, and it's out of the way when I don't. It's just what you want out of a domain registrar. So check it out yourself. Go to hover.com/ATP to learn more and get 10% off your first purchase. That's hover.com/ATP. Hover, get a domain name for your passion.
So back to Ask ATP. Thankfully, we have a quick one to round us out. Stefan Kozlowski writes, do you guys pronounce the command sudo as sudo or sudo? And I will start by saying I have always pronounced it sudo, and I understand that it stands for super user do, so sudo is probably the more academically correct answer, but I've always pronounced it sudo.
I had to think about this question because I think I do both out loud and both in my head, depending on context. That's the conclusion I came to by tracing through the times that I've said it or thinking about it. I think I do both. I don't know. It's not a satisfying answer, but I think that's the reality.
I pronounce it wrong, and I don't care. I'm proud of it. I say sudo, and I know it's super user do. I'm very aware of this. However, I don't care. To me, sudo is its own word, and so it gets its own pronunciation.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong. That's just one of two very common pronunciations. Like, who's to say which is? I don't even know if that is the less common one. And maybe for all I know, it's the more common one.
It's a Linux thing. It's definitely wrong. There's always whatever everyone does with Linux. A lot of people will say it's wrong.
Well, I don't know. I think that it's in the running to being the more popular one. Because, like you said, it is a word, PSEUDO. Like the fact that people just substitute a word there and how to say.
Oh, that was what I was talking about. I was just saying, basically, conceptually in my head, I read that as sudo. Like, I read it as a word that, and I know what it means. It's like being fluent in a language. Like, I'm not thinking about its component parts. I'm thinking oh, I need to sudo to do this command. Like, that is its own word in my head. I don't think like, oh, I need to super use or do. Like, when I make a directory, I think, oh, make dir, like or mcdir, like I think that in my head, like as like its component parts. So I don't like think about that as in. I don't say like make dir. It's dir for directories. So, but sudo to me, like that has become its own word in my head. So that's why I pronounce it the way I do, and I don't care about the component parts of it and how they're pronounced.
All right, John, tell me about your black screen of death.
This could have been follow-up, but I'm trying to, I think it has wandered out of follow-up, and now it's just like practically a weekly segment where I complain about my laptop in some way.
People gave me so much crap when I was complaining about my laptops.
But these are not systemic complaints. These are specific complaints for the most part. And sometimes it's not complaints. Sometimes it's just updates on like my life with the MacBook. Like the Touch Bar thing was not really a complaint about the Touch Bar, just telling you like I tried to use it and it wasn't for me. Like, you know what I mean? So that's different. But anyway, this might not be a laptop bug, but it's a situation I find myself in frequently. And one of those things where I don't know where to blame it, but it makes my overall experience with this thing worse. I think I mentioned it before so I've got this docking station. And it's great when everything works well, but sometimes it gets cranky when I undock it. So I'll undock and I'll undock with it in clamshell mode, and I'll go off to a meeting or something, and then I'll arrive at the meeting, open up my laptop, and everything about it will work perfectly except for the screen is 100% black. And I used to know that everything was working perfectly back when the Touch Bar was not in the mode that I changed it to, where it just shows the function keys all the time, because I would unlock with Touch ID, or unlock by typing my password into the totally black screen, and then I could command tab, and I could see the touch bar changing as I command tabbed among the applications that, everything's working. I'm command tabbing. I'm presuming the trackpad is working. If I could see the mouse cursor, it would be moving. I could, type keyboard commands that I know worked in the frontmost application, and like I could, if I could use it without seeing the screen, it was all working, but the screen was 100% black, and nothing I would do to that computer sitting there would make that screen not be black. Put it to sleep, wake it up again, close the lid, open it. The only way I found to bring it back is a hardware way, where I would use my little... They have some little dongle thingy that goes in the side that gives you like a USB port, and HDMI, and a bunch of other crap. Plug that in the side, and then plug the room's monitor into the HDMI port. And that would wake up... my machine would start projecting on the external screen, but also it would wake up the internal display. Right. So I've had this bug for a really long time, and it's annoying. Sometimes I've had to leave the meeting room, go back to my desk, get my dongle, come back to the room, plug it in, plug in the HDMI monitor, and then my thing is awake. Anyway, I ran into this problem, and I'm calling this the black screen of death, even though it's not death. It's like in limbo. It's alive, but blind. This happened to me where I unplugged my thing because I was in a hurry to get home, unplugged it, and I needed to use my laptop at home. And I got home and opened it up, and sure enough, black screen. And I didn't have my little dongle because it was back at work. So I couldn't do the one magic hardware thing that makes my screen come back to life. And I tried so many other things. I tried SSHing into it from another machine. I tried plugging in other things. I tried getting out my very own Apple-branded HDMI dongle and plugging it into my gaming monitor, which is HDMI, and turning everything on. And that didn't wake up the screen. In the end, I had to hard reset the thing, which really annoyed me. That's why I spent like 20 minutes trying to bring this thing back, because I was in the middle of a lot of stuff. You might be surprised to hear that I had a lot of windows open.
You?
I had a lot.
No.
I had a lot of things going on. I had a lot of terminals, a lot of shells, and no, I don't use any one of the million things that can let me resume my shelf from exactly where I left off. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm disappointing all the people who love Tmux and Screen and all the other things that do that.
That's right. I also use none of those things. I always have tons of terminal tabs and windows open, and it's fine.
Right. Anyway, I was annoyed that I lost everything that I was working on and had to hard reset my computer. Who wants to hard reset it? And the worst part is I'm not hard resetting it because it crashed. I'm not hard resetting it because it's frozen. It's not like everything was fine except the screen was 100% black. So this is really putting a damper. This bug and the possibility that this bug can be there and my annoyance when it happens. It's kind of like the month 13 is out of bounds thing, where it's like everything is mostly working, but there's some part of it that's not working that you feel like someone should notice. So I think something in the operating system should be aware after a certain period of time that there is A, no monitor attached, and B, the screen is entirely black. And I don't think that's a sustainable state, and the lid is open. I think that set of things, there should be some assertion in the operating system that says, if no monitor is attached and the lid is open and you're awake, but the screen is 100% black, fix that. Like, make it not be like that. I'm hoping that's a thing that it can detect, and I don't know who to blame. Maybe I blame the docking station. Maybe it's an OS bug. Who knows? But anyway, I don't like laptops.
Are you on High Sierra on this?
Yes. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm on regular Sierra. Sorry.
Okay, so it probably isn't like I guess it isn't a new OS bug, at least, but not like Sierra was bug-free either.
I don't know what it is. It's just my latest in a long line of infuriating sort of bugs on my laptop.
So I can assure you that this is not only not a bug that has been fixed in High Sierra, but it is not unique to your laptop, because my MarcoBook Pro that I use at work, that exhibits this same behavior. Now, I wouldn't say that it happens all the time. I wouldn't even say that it happens terribly often. But the only solution I had come up with for it was occasionally I can sleep it and then reopen it, close the lid and reopen it. And then sometimes it'll come back. Or like you said, disconnect external monitors, reconnect external monitors. But just like you said, additionally, there are times that I just have to just kill the machine and bring it back. So this is a clamshell problem. This is a software problem. This is not a new MacBook Pro problem. And that is very sad.
I mean, it seems like there must be some hardware aspect to it, because I don't think merely closing the lid and opening it. I think it's the fact that you're attaching an external monitor, and something about the I've attached a monitor, please detect that it's there and start sending your video signal to it. Oh, you just yanked it out. I have to handle that. Like, it's related to the fact that the hardware configuration of the machine is changing. Like, I've never seen it. Once the computer is working in isolation and I'm not plugging anything into it, I've never seen it happen there where I close the lid and open it and the screen doesn't turn on. So I don't know. But yeah, like these type of problems, very often waking from sleep problems and stuff like that. But I feel like waking from sleep is almost more explicable. It's like, well, the computer's not even awake. And so, like, obviously it's not working. This is the worst, because it's so clear, especially with the touch bar, that everything is working just fine. That the computer is running, it just refuses to display anything on the screen. And I find that infuriating.
I should also add, since this is apparently the airing of grievances, it is the holiday season after all, I should add that my MarcoBook Pro is now going to have to go in for service when I'm out over the holidays, because it turns out if you plug in and remove, what is the port on the side? What is it? Thunderbolt, but it's also known as
mini display port.
Mini display port. Yeah, thank you. If you plug and unplug mini display port cables every single day, all day, every day, turns out they start to fail over time. So Monday, when I got to the office, I tried to plug in my two LG 4K monitors, and one of them in particular wouldn't plug in for the longest time. I would switch around cables. I switched around, where I was plugging them in. It was nothing I could do to get it to work. And then finally, I had actually my head IT guy come over and look at it, and he plugged in his MarcoBook Pro, and it worked no problem immediately. Unplugged it, plugged it back in, worked no problem. So it appears that either the graphics card is dying or the connectors are getting screwed up in some way, shape, or form. So I hope, Marco, that in your beloved MarcoBook Pro, that you are not often using the Thunderbolt ports, because over time, after a year or two, after a couple of years, you might find them failing. So good luck.
Yeah, this is one of the things that the move to USB-C made a lot better. That USB-C, as far as I can tell so far, the connection does wear out over time, just like many of them do. However, it seems like the parts that wear out are mostly in the cable end and not in the port end. So it is kind of annoying that your cable loosens up over time, especially when it's your power cable to your new MacBook Pro. But it does seem like that's probably an easier fix long term, that you can probably just replace the cable in those conditions for USB-C. But the mini display port connector that then became the Thunderbolt connector, that's never been a good connector. Like, one of the big problems with it is that the cables are kind of loose in there. Like, there's nothing like holding them in, really. So they can just very easily like slide out or get a little bit dislodged or a little bit like jostled, and yeah. I will defend a lot of great things about the 2015 era Retina MacBook Pro. However, the design of the Thunderbolt port is not one.
Yep. So I kind of wish I had a Thunderbolt one, or a Touch Bar one, but That ain't never going to happen. My IT guy refuses to buy any Touch Bar MacBook Pros, and maybe it's because he's smarter than me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it from the point of view of an IT manager at a company. Like a computer that seems to have a pretty high keyboard failure rate compared to most computers. And again, people who defend this keyboard, even if that rate is 20%, that's still really high for a computer that has only existed for a year. If that's the kind of failure rate you see on a pool of these new computers, and if buying them would make you have to like rebuy a whole bunch of dongles or display things or projecting things or things like that for like the whole office, you can totally understand why an IT manager would be like, yeah, that's not worth it. Like we can't afford the downtime for the keyboards. That's a lot of work for the IT people to have to like, pull those out of service from the company when the keyboards break, get them repaired, put them back into service, figure out things in the meantime. Like that's a huge burden on an IT staff. And even before all you consider all the dongle stuff. So that makes total sense. Like, I totally get it. And that's probably why Apple still sells the 2015 model new in the Apple Store today. They probably sell a ton of them to big corporate purchasers who just want what they've been buying for years because they know it's fine, they're already equipped for it, and it's pretty reliable. Except when you have to replace your Thunderbolt port. We are sponsored this week by Betterment. Rethink what your money can do. Visit betterment.com/ATP to start your review today. Betterment is the largest independent online financial advisor designed to help improve your long-term returns and lower your taxes for retirement planning, building wealth, and your other financial goals. Betterment takes advanced investment strategies and uses technology to deliver them to more than 270,000 customers. This gives you personalized advice for your financial planning needs. And Betterment is a fiduciary, which means they don't get commissions for recommending certain funds, and they don't have any funds of their own. They only do what they believe is right for you. They do all this by bringing very low fees to you as well, with only a 0.25% annual fee with their standard plan that includes unlimited messaging access to their team of licensed financial experts. If you have a more complex financial situation, Betterment Premium gives you unlimited phone call access to their team of certified financial planners for only 0.4% annually. These are incredibly low, transparent fees compared to traditional services. Betterment also offers things like tax advancing strategies. So everything they do is designed to lower your taxes and increase your returns. So on average, Betterment's tax coordinated portfolio, which is one of your options, can increase portfolio value by an estimated 15% over 30 years. Right now, Betterment's offering a free 5-minute investment review, helping you assess your investment account's tax strategies, fees, and risk exposure with no sign-up required. Investing involves risk. For more information, visit betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP to start your review today. Betterment, rethink what your money can do.
We have somehow accidentally procrastinated for an hour and 20 minutes by my clock, but we should probably talk about the iMac Pro. And unfortunately for me, I started to have a holiday party and made it through about a half a drink because I was very busy tonight. So I'm sad to report, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not a holiday party for me, and I'm going to have to endure this sober, and I'm doing it for you, the listener. So, all right, guys, tell me about what's going on.
Wait, why do you have to endure this? Aren't you sitting in front of a 5K iMac right now?
I'm mostly giving you a hard time. I am sitting in front of a 5K iMac.
So you're an iMac buyer. This is a computer that could potentially be for you. You like this kind of computer. I do.
I'm mostly giving you two a hard time.
Yeah, don't you do a lot of video transcoding and buy all of Apple stuff in space gray?
The sick thing about the iMac Pro is the thing that I think appeals most to me about it is the fact that it's space gray, because I think that is so hot and it is so ridiculous. And I'll be the first to tell you that is utterly, truly ridiculous. That the thing I'm most excited about is the color, but oh my God, it looks so good. And those accessories look so good. I snark. And if you're not a longtime ATP listener, I don't remember which episode it was, and I probably won't remember to put in the show notes, but it was early on in our run. Yeah, well, it was all of them. But no, early on in our run, it just so happened that I knew we were going to be talking about the Mac Pro, and I don't remember why, because there was no news about it, but we were going to be talking about the Mac Pro, And I made the mistake of bringing my drink upstairs with me into the office while I recorded. No, I didn't spill it on anything, but that part wasn't the mistake. The mistake was that I also brought the bottle with me. And by the end of that episode, I had quite the holiday party all by myself. And so anyway, it's very embarrassing, and I probably won't link it because I am embarrassed by it, and I shouldn't have done it, but it is what it is, and you only live once. Anyway, the iMac Pro does appeal to me. We should do a kind of an overview in just a moment. It does appeal to me. I don't think I find it worth all of that money. I'm not saying that it's an unreasonable price. I'm not saying that it should be lower. I'm just saying I have a really nice iMac in front of me. And yes, I do transcode things a lot. Yes, I am getting into video now. But sitting here now, I don't feel like I need a new computer, which is usually stage one in case you're buying a new computer. So anyway, Marco, tell me about what this iMac Pro is all about.
We actually there's still a lot of big unknowns about it because as we record this, it is actually are they going to launch it at 3 a.m. tonight?
Oh, I think you're right. Are we just going to... Maybe I should start my holiday party after
just
all.
Keep podcasting until the configurator goes live, and then we can answer more questions.
I really don't want to do that, but there's something to be said for how funny that would be. And I will go downstairs and get myself more water and my bottle, and we can do a holiday party if that's what it takes.
No, I'm not staying up till 3 a.m.
That'll be just me and the listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to wake up... Because the thing is, for me, the Christmas season is way too busy for me to... buy a new desktop and set it up and move my stuff over and everything. I'm way, way too busy for a while. So if I just wait until the morning to order mine, if I order one, I'm still telling myself if.
You said that and I took pause, but I didn't want to ruin your flow. So I just bit my tongue, but you're going to order one. Now it may not be tomorrow. I believe that it may not be tomorrow, but you're going to order one.
It's probably going to be at least 8 a.m. I'm not going to wake up at 3, but maybe I might wait until 8. So anyway, all this is to say, at the moment that we're recording, we don't know any of the pricing and the configuration options really. We know what options will be available roughly, but we don't know if there are certain combinations that they will require. We don't know some of the finer details of some of the options. The core counts are going to be 8, 10, 14, and 18. But the 14 and 18 aren't available until, quote, early next year. We don't know what that means, really. That could mean in 2 weeks, or that could mean in 3 months. So there's a whole lot of unknowns. And the biggest thing is that we only know the base price at this moment. We only know that it starts at $5,000, and that is 8-core, 1 terabyte, and I think 32 gigs of RAM, which is a great, that's an awesome config. That is my iMac, but with twice the cores. My iMac is 32 gigs of RAM. It was the top CPU at the time I bought it, which was in 2014, and that was $4,300 or something like that at the time. I think the top iMac is slightly cheaper now, but it's when you spec up an iMac to be 1 terabyte of SSD and 32 gigs of RAM, you're already getting about $4,000. You're near that point, and so for this to be 8 cores starting at $5,000, and for it to be the Xeon line with ECC RAM,
and
workstation GPU. Yeah, way better GPU, faster SSD, and a whole lot of extra stuff. Am I reading correctly from the reviews that it comes with all 3 peripherals? It comes with a trackpad, keyboard, and mouse?
It's so hard to tell from these early reviews because, like you said about the pricing, you also Apple just gives you a bunch of stuff and say, here you go. They don't say, would it even be possible to order it this way? Or would you have to say, yeah, you can buy all these input devices, but you only get to pick one, to come for free with your iMac Pro.
This is why you're going to win the bet. You're going to make me buy a whole second iMac Pro just so I can get a black just so I can get a black trackpad and a black mouse.
That's the real black tax.
Yeah.
Wow,
you have to buy a whole second machine to get
yeah, no more $300 extra.
Yeah, I lamented the $150 or whatever it was for the black book, and this is a whole new world.
Anyway, so all this is to say, pricing is still a big unknown for us for all the details. The configuration that the reviewers all had was 10 core, so it's one step up in the processor line from 8 to 10 core. And I believe it was it 64 gigs of RAM?
128 gigs of RAM.
Okay, yeah. So that's probably going to be a $7,000 configuration.
Yeah. And the big sort of non-linear price increases are always going to be 128 gigs of RAM and 4 terabyte SSD. Those are going to cost as much as a car. Like, I don't know what. It's never like it's double the price of the size that's half as much. Nope, it is not. It is more.
No, it's not.
So.
Yeah, it's going to be like 1 terabyte comes with it. 2 terabytes might be like plus 400, and then 4 terabytes might be like plus 1200. It's going to be like that kind of jump. Like. It might even be more than that because these are pretty...
Yeah, and the interesting thing about these computers, and we knew this already, but I think people are relearning it for the second time because again, we saw these machines at WWDC, like actually physically saw them, and in my case, touched them even though you weren't supposed to. Got yelled at by the Apple person. But there's no upgradability in this. This is a question we asked the person who was there, like, is the RAM soldered to the board or is it in slots? He said it's in slots, but you can't get at them. Like, there's no little door for you to upgrade the RAM. There's like you configure this machine from Apple and you buy it, and that's it. Now, in theory, you could, like iFixit could probably find a way to open this thing up and take out the RAM and upgrade it. Like, there's nothing really stopping you from doing it. It's not like it's locked with the key or whatever, except for perhaps a secure boot thing, which we'll get to in a minute. But who knows how they're integrating that with their RAM. But essentially, there are no upgradable parts inside this thing that you are allowed to change, or that you can bring it to an Apple store and say, "I'd like to buy more RAM. Can you put more RAM in this for me?" Apple's going to say, "No, the RAM that you got is what you kind of." Same thing with upgrading the CPU or any sort of other stuff like that. Which, if you're going to have a machine that's totally sealed up, this is the one to do it on, because the iMac, the whole point of it is it's all in one, right? And the Mac Pro is coming, and that really highlights what we think will be a very important difference between the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro. The iMac Pro has the freedom now to say 100% sealed box, configure it the way you want it, and that's it. No doors, no flaps, no upgrading after the fact. It's just the machine you get is the machine you get, paving the way for the Mac Pro to take the opposite choice. So some people are kind of annoyed at that, but I feel like it is a reasonably smart differentiation between these two machines. So it's clear to you, why would I buy this one machine over the other? It's like, well, if you want everything in one, and beautiful and elegant and simple and clean and sealed up and done, it's the iMac. And if you want the other thing, it's the Mac Pro.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we don't actually know yet whether the Mac Pro will be upgradable.
We don't, but we're hoping.
I mean, the tube was slightly upgradable. Like, you could change the RAM. You could add RAM. That's it.
You could swap out the SSD too.
I don't think anybody ever sold the SSDs separately.
Yeah, it wasn't like, I think it was like the M.2 whatever thing. It wasn't entirely, you could buy stuff. The whole point is you could open the case and pull things out of it. Whereas this, for all we know, it's glued together. Like, I don't even know how easy it is to even get inside this thing.
I mean, it's probably like every other iMac. Like, all the components appear to face the back, but you can't open it from the back probably. So you probably have to remove the screen and basically
which
go
may
in
be glued on.
Right, and so it's probably like magnets like the other one. But anyway, it's probably very similar to the construction of the 27-inch iMac today. So you probably can get into it, but you don't want to, because it involves so much surgery on the screen that lay people really shouldn't do it, because you will risk damaging things or getting dust in there or whatever else. So it's something that Apple can do it, their technicians can do it, but you shouldn't.
And it looks pretty clean inside from the pictures they have on Apple's website. If you look inside there, if the back came off in a reasonable way, it's pretty nicely laid out. The RAM is really easy to get to. It's sitting right there in little dim slots. You could pull it right out. It's got a nice little heat pipe arrangement with the central heat sink and the two fans, and it looks nice in there. It looks like they, sweated the details and made it look nice on the inside, even though nobody's ever going to see that except for an Apple technician when, some part of it breaks or something.
Yeah, but ultimately, I am very excited about this machine. I was a little excited about it when it was announced this past summer, but I'm even more excited now that we're getting performance numbers and that we're getting the first reviews that have been out. The best review that I've seen so far is the MKBHD review. He's had it for he said about a week, and he's a hard user on it. He creates and produces very high-end video content. So he's editing high bandwidth, high resolution video on this thing, and that really pushes it. One of the major concerns I had with the iMac Pro when we first heard about it was, I believe we talked about it in our live show at WWDC this past summer, which my main concern was how does it handle being under load? Because my regular 5K iMac, it's a very graceful machine until you really ask it to do something hard. And then you hear annoying fan noise, and the fan really spins up, and it's loud, and it's just kind of ungraceful. And a Mac Pro historically has not done that. Mac Pros usually are able to take pretty much any workload and still be dead silent or close enough to silent that you won't hear it in an average room. And so I really miss that. Like going back to a consumer level product like the regular iMac or a laptop, like when you put it under load and you hear the fan spinning, I always kind of feel like, yeah, this really isn't made to do this very much. So anyway, I heat and how it deals with heat is a big question mark for me. Upgradability is kind of a known thing at this point. Like the laptops haven't been meaningfully upgradable since 2012. The desktops, the only thing that's been upgradable about the desktops anytime recently has been RAM, and even that is slowly fading away in the rest of the lineup. So, really, to me, like the upgradability thing is, it's certainly something. It's significant. It matters, I think, more for long-term servicing costs than necessarily getting a good deal up front. Like in the olden days, you'd be able to buy a MacBook or whatever, or a PowerBook, and go get third-party RAM from Crucial or OWC or something like that, and save a bunch of money on a high-end configuration by buying the parts yourself and putting them in from third parties. Those days are long gone for the entire lineup, desktop to laptop. Like, the only thing you can still do that for is Casey's iMac. And you shouldn't, because look what happened to Casey's iMac.
I was waiting for somebody to make that joke and prepared to make it myself.
Not the reason you shouldn't, but like I think the second use case is just longevity. Because if you buy it and you're happy, like you buy a 32 gig arrangement and you're happy, and it turns out that this thing is so reliable and the screen just looks gorgeous year after year that the thing is 5 years old, and you're like, you know what, this thing still does everything I need it to do, but I could use a little bit more RAM because I thought 32 would be enough for me to do what I need to do forever. But the latest version of Adobe's whatever suite is just a RAM monster, and I would really like to have 64. And that's where you want the ability to say, yeah, I used it for 5 years for 32, and it was great. To extend the life of this machine, let me upgrade it to 64. And you totally could on this machine if you could get inside it in a reasonable way, but you can't. So if there was a little RAM door, you would yank out the RAM 5 years later and put in some new RAM. And same caveats about third-party RAM and yada, yada. That's the whole reason Apple doesn't want you doing that. It makes sense. But it really does extend the life of the machines if you can add an SSD to a thing that had a spinning disk, or add a faster SSD, or expand the RAM. And that's basically all you've been able to do with any Mac for the longest time, if you've been able to do anything at all. But it does extend the life of your machines. I mean, just my Mac Pro is the obvious example where so much of the insides have been swapped and rotated and just gotten better and better over time that it's extended the life of the machine. If it was still the way I bought it when it was new, it would be completely unusable right now.
Oh, yeah. But that was also in many ways a product of the times that it went through. Like, the SSD transition is, that's not going to happen again, right? Or unless maybe we move to like those RAM computers.
Yeah, but even just a video card. I've gone through like 3 or 4 video cards in this thing, each one faster than the next. That's really extended the gaming life of the machine.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, like I feel like most of those days are over. Like there was a good section on Connected this week where Steven talked about the video card upgradability of previous Mac Pros, and like usually people who want upgradable Mac Pros, like, they usually think of it, if they haven't done it before, they think of it from like a PC builder perspective, where if you're in the PC world, building Windows PCs, you can like swap out video cards with all sorts of different great options all the time. Everything costs very little money, relatively speaking, and you have tons of great options. When the Mac world, you've only ever been limited to like the handful of cards that actually supported the Mac. And this has been true of many peripherals, even when the Mac Pros were the tower style, like what you have and what I used to have. Like, you couldn't just put in any PCI Express card in there and have it work. Like, many of them would, but most of them wouldn't, or they would work partially.
It was more than you'd think. More than you'd think if you had the flash nut, because it's basically just based on the architecture. Like Apple makes drivers usually for the architecture, not just for a very specific card. So a lot more cards than would work than you think. But even if it was just a handful of cards, it's not. Yeah, you don't have the selection of a PC builder, but to have the option to put a faster card in there, even if you only have literally one choice, there's only one choice that you can buy that is faster than your current one. It's way better than 0 choices. And one of the things I put in the notes here, this is a tweet from Bare Feet's, the website that does lots of this kind of testing, emphasizes this fact. If they were they have benchmarks, like these are OpenCL benchmarks, so they're things that run on the GPU of the iMac Pro, and then they pitted it against a 2010 Mac Pro, and the 2010 Mac Pro was faster. Why? Because the 2010 Mac Pro has a replaceable video card, and like Marco said, there's not a lot of choices for what you can put in the 2010 Mac Pro, but there are a couple of them, and one of them they were able to put in there was one that uses the same architecture as the GPU in the iMac Pro, so it's an AMD Vega, or however you pronounce it, 64. So they put that card in, and because it's the same architecture, and because macOS has drivers for it because of the iMac Pro, it's able to use that card. And it just so happens to the card that they could fit in that gigantic 2010 Mac Pro tower that has tons of room for cooling and everything, that card is just faster than the one that's in the iMac, because the iMac is a slower card. It's probably clocked slower because it's a more thermally compromised environment. And so if what you care about is GPU performance in your 3D programmer, in your OpenCL whatever program, 2010 Mac Pro is faster than an iMac Pro. And I think this also highlights the role that the Mac Pro might play. Will the Mac Pro have an upgradable GPU? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the most important thing for these type of computers, for the Mac Pro or even for the iMac Pro, is to be super fast when you release, which I think this qualifies. Like, it's got lots of cores in the CPUs, and if you have an application that you use them, it will really make a difference in your life. The storage on this Mac Pro is really, really fast. The iMac Pro is really fast. It's faster than the laptops, right? And so that makes it the fastest Mac Apple has, because the old Mac Pro is so old. And it's got, the GPU is plenty fast, right? But to fulfill its role as the iMac Pro, I feel like next year there needs to be a much faster GPU in the iMac Pro, or they need to update the internals of this iMac Pro on a reasonable basis. Fine, they're not upgradable, fine, but Apple itself has to upgrade them and revise them, because otherwise it will just get more and more embarrassing that your 2010 Mac Pro, every year you can buy a new GPU to get you, a 2x speed boost and whatever it is that you're doing, and the iMac Pro, year after year, like, the internals don't get upgraded. And if the Mac Pro is or isn't upgradable, same story. Technology marches on, and at the very, very top end, Apple has to be committed to releasing computers that are competitive with the top end, and then revising their computers to continue to be competitive. And if they don't want to revise them, then merely make certain components upgradable, and people will buy a PC Vega card that is faster than the one that they had before, and flash it and throw it in there, and it will work because the drivers work with every card in that architecture, and everyone will be happy.
My biggest concern here is the thermals. And I believe them when they say they've gotten they've gotten the iMac enclosure to cool the up to 500 watt load that they are putting in here, or that it's designed for. But it seems like there's not a lot of headroom. Like, and this was exactly the problem they had with the 2013 cylinder Mac Pro. Craig Federighi famously said that they designed themselves into a thermal corner. It seems like the 2013 Mac Pro was designed with just barely enough cooling power, and even then it wasn't really quite enough because of the way the dual GPUs got so hot. With this, it seems like they went into it, like, John, you mentioned last time we talked about this, that like they went into the design brief of this seemingly with like fit pro workstation grade components into the iMac enclosure. Well, why? Like, why couldn't it be a little bit differently shaped?
Why couldn't it be designed an enclosure that supports pro grade components, like the reverse?
Exactly. And so because of that, because they went in with the apparent goal or requirement of fit this into the iMac case that was never designed for this amount of thermal load. I mean, this case was designed in 2012, or was launched in 2012, and it was launched with the second generation 27-inch iMac. Even the Retina one was not designed for this. Like, this was before the 5K. We have shoved so much stuff into the exact same size enclosure that in 2012 they probably were not thinking of when they designed the shape and ventilation and size and everything else. With that in mind, with the thermals as a severely limiting factor probably here, I worry that on two fronts. Number one, I worry, like, how much did they have to clock down the GPU and the CPUs to fit here?
And that gets to what you were saying of like if they're on the ragged edge of their thing. If they've had to downclock things, they couldn't support the cooling, and the only way they could get things to fit is they had to say, well, let's just slightly downclock everything. I don't know if that's true. That's just been a rumor for a while that like basically all the components are running at slower speeds from the GPUs and the CPUs and the RAM and every part of the system. Not a lot downclock, but just a little bit. And the only reason you do that is because you couldn't cool them running at their full speed. And that, I mean, maybe that's a compromise for like, hey, this is a slim computer, it's all in one, you don't have a big box, you don't have a big thing or whatever. I don't think it's unreasonable, but it does, optimistically say this now further emphasizes why you might want the upcoming Mac Pro, because presumably that one will not have to downclock its components. And so it will therefore be faster and have more headroom and everything. So, and that gets to your point, Marco, about if they had to downclock things, that you're concerned like about all the same things about the 2012, about reliability and about noise. And so it could be argued that the 2013 Mac Pro, the trash can, privileged noise above reliability. Like it was very quiet all the time, but maybe it should have been a little bit more noisy because there was lots of overheating problems with the GPUs, right? So maybe they made a different choice here. That's one thing that I found lacking in all the reviews is a rigorous testing of the noise. I mean, people gave their subjective, reviews or whatever, but I'm looking for someone who's like a fanatic on it, than like I am about fan noise.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like the reliability, that's not a small point, because nothing in here is really serviceable, because even Apple getting to it is challenging, taking off the screen probably and everything. And because these are all expensive custom components, like this is not a machine that I would want to own out of warranty very long. And I certainly would never buy one out of warranty, and I would probably try to not sell it out of warranty, because I worry that if it's operating at so close to the thermal limits of this enclosure, because this enclosure was never designed for this, it's similar to a laptop, where like laptops often run like pretty warm if you push them like all the time. And laptops tend not to last as long. They tend to have reliability problems, or components break, or you have like heat fatigue and your GPU falls off, or things like that. Like there's all sorts of problems with laptops with just things that run too hot because they have such constrained enclosures. This is basically a giant workstation laptop in a big screen. In the way that like it is clearly very thermally constrained. The old Mac Pro towers and even the trash can Mac Pro, those had a lot of headroom for most configurations. The main problem the trash can had was if you actually stressed the GPUs, that would cause a problem. If you just stressed the CPU, it was fine, because it was designed with the kind of asymmetric triangle of heatsink in the middle there. It was designed to have one very hot side, which was the CPU, and two kind of hot sides, which were the GPUs. And as long as the kind of hot sides didn't get super hot, it was fine. But unfortunately, that's not how people work anymore. And they sold it as a GPU workstation, which is kind of a problem. So, but I think it could have been done as it was, as quietly as it was, if they just made it a little bit bigger. The main problem with the Trash Can Mac Pro, I think, is probably just they wanted to make it small, and they succeeded. It was very impressively small. But that's something that like nobody was really asking for, and instead they made it unreliable if you stress the GPUs. Anyway, with this, I feel like they've done the same thing. Like they've kept it super thin and on the edges, just like the current one, and the back of it's pretty small too. And they've kept the same enclosure. But why? Nobody was asking for that, and it has severely constrained them.
They didn't even put that many more vents. Like the vents are bigger, but like the back of this is not covered with vents in places where the regular ones aren't. They hid the vents behind the leg just like they always do, so it looks clean from the back. And that is like not only are they keeping the case the same, which presumably has big advantages in terms of tooling. You don't have to come up with a whole new case design. You don't have to come up with a whole new set of machines to carve out your case. Like it's just some different slotting in the thing, and whatever. I don't know if that's actually as big a savings as it might seem to be, but. There's something to be said for keeping some things the same. But they could have made the entire back of this thing like a giant cheese grater, and that would certainly allow more airflow into and out of this thing, and would have allowed you to have bigger, lazier, slower spinning fans instead of two relatively fast ones pushing all the air out of the central thing and pulling all the air in through these little slits, right? So it's all very elegant looking and everything. And we don't know. We're worrying more than anything else. We're not saying there's going to be thermal problems. Even the downclocking thing is just something I've read as a rumor, and I haven't actually seen anyone pull out the speeds for all the components and say, here are the speeds for the components, and if you put these things in a PC, you would never clock them down like this if you had adequate cooling. Like, so we don't know, but that gets to the heart of what you were talking about before. Like, the reason you pay for all these expensive components, Xeons and ECC RAM and all that other stuff, is for the reliability factor. And if the reliability factor is undercut by the thermals and the form factor, then that makes this a less compelling purchase.
Right. Like, I don't want my professional workstation, $5,000 and up computer to be operating very close to its thermal limits from day one. Because especially since I can't service anything. Because what that tells me is I don't think this is going to last as long as a tower. And my current iMac, I think, has similar issues. I think that's just inherent in the iMac design that, like, when you constrain things with thermals, things don't last reliably as long. As simple as that. That's been the case for all computer hardware forever. When you can give them more thermal headroom, they last longer and they run more reliably and they run more gracefully under load. And it's important to say what you just said, because, like, we still don't know. We haven't used this yet. None of us have one. We haven't used it, and the reviews have not been very clear about load and thermals and noise and everything else. But that is a major concern for me, at least, that they crammed all this stuff into a case that was never designed to handle it. And even though they did a lot of work on the cooling system and redesigning the internals and everything, it was still a case that was not designed for 500-watt workstation-grade components inside. So that's my main concern, is, like, is this really going to last? And as I mentioned a few months ago, I think, I'm not sure I want to spend $6,000 on a great computer that is going to be really flaky in 3 years.
Oh, you'll just sell it before then anyway, so.
Maybe. But I don't sell desktops that often. I mean, look, I'm still using my 2014 iMac now. And so I really, like, seeing the reviews of this, I really want one. I really, really do. Because I really want a speed upgrade. I do so much parallel work that would benefit from those new cores. So much. I really want the black trackpad.
Your compiling would probably benefit from both the faster disks and I don't know if the disks are faster in random seek, because I haven't seen that. But I like the disk subsystem. I think is getting short shrift here, because first of all, the disk subsystem in the 2016 and 2017s was much faster than it was before. People don't, for large data transfers, like if you're doing like video or something like that. And again, I don't know how it is for random access of a bunch of small files and stuff, but I love seeing stuff like that, because people don't think, oh, it's got an SSD, and they think SSD equals SSD equals SSD, but SSDs get faster, and part of the advantages of buying expensive pro hardware is it should have the fastest SSD on the fastest interface, and so the numbers coming out of this is like 3 gigs per second, read and write, sustained through the internal storage, and that's great. That's better than Casey's little MacBook Adorable, right? A lot better. And that's exactly, they both have SSDs. Aren't they the same speed? They are not, right? That's what I want out of a pro machine. And that's, this machine for, like, processing 8K video and stuff like that. That's a lot of data to move on and off the disk and into and out of RAM. And so, all thumbs up on that. That's one of the things that's attracting me to the machine. The reason I think that for so many applications, like the very fastest Mac that Apple sells, maybe it won't make everything that you do faster, especially if you don't take advantage of the multiple cores. But, if you do stuff that it uses lots of disk bandwidth, even if you don't care about the CPU cores or the GPU, this is the best disk machine. If you just do stuff with GPUs, this is far and away going to be the fastest GPU, even if you don't care about the cores and you don't care about the disks. Like, there's a lot to like, even if you're not going to use every aspect of this computer. And yeah, you have to pay for the other aspects too, which is the reason people get cranky. Like, I just want the good GPU. I don't need Xeons. I don't need all this other stuff. Like, well, you get it all, right? It's expensive. It's just the way it is. But having to pay for it all to get, like, a good GPU is way better than literally having no option except to buy a 2010 Mac Pro and a third-party GPU and shove it in there.
Yeah. And the final thing that I worry about here before anybody has one is having this much heat going to be a problem for the screen? This iMac was designed in 2012 when the components behind it were 85 watt to 100 watt load probably. Now it can be up to 500 watt load. Is having that amount of heat right up against the back of the LCD panel going to be a problem for the longevity and quality of the LCD panel? Like, are you going to develop like a splotch in like the right quadrant near the middle where the processor is on the back. Like I don't know, like how do LCDs handle very high heat being, generated on a component that is stuck to the back of them for 3 years? These are the kinds of things I'm worried about. Like, as I said, like I'm so excited about this machine, and I'm probably going to buy at least one. But I don't know. Like these are problems that I wouldn't worry about if it was a tower, and I intend to buy the tower when that comes out too. Like the only reason I'm even talking about this now is because Tiff wants me to buy this, so that way I can give it to her when I get the tower. So that's probably what I'm going to do. But it's hard not to think about those concerns when like I've been a little bit burned by iMacs in the past, and I've had such great experiences with the towers.
I'm surprised that you're harping on the thermal stuff so much, because it seems to me like Apple has got to know what the thermal requirements for this thing are. And with the trash can, yes, they designed themselves into a corner in that they didn't have a lot of headroom, which is what you said before. But it's not like it was broken the moment it shipped. And so I don't think this is going to be any different. I really don't. And having seen it very briefly, I saw it, when we were at WWDC, as did John. And my recollection of that brief window of time I spent with it was that I could hear the fans, even despite the fact that it was in a very loud demo room. And they said that the fans were screaming deliberately because it was a very early pre-release model, and they just, wanted to crank the fans up to, 11 to make sure that whatever they were demoing on screen, which I don't even remember anymore, didn't cause any problems. And those fans, I'm sorry to report, gentlemen, my recollection were they were loud. Now, that doesn't mean they were going to be loud always. It doesn't mean they were going to be loud every time you hit, Command R and Xcode, but it certainly seemed like it was capable of moving a whole lot of air. And you very well could be right. I mean, obviously, all three of us are just pontificating at the moment, but I would be really surprised if we see widespread thermal issues with this thing. I mean, it has been extensively redesigned on the inside specifically to avoid that very problem.
But so is the trash can. Like, and that's exactly what it had. Was maybe not from day one, but it had GPU failures due to heat, right? And so, that was the major and I think the only sort of systemic hardware problem with the trash cans. And Marco is sitting there right now in front of a computer that he says runs the GPU too hot, and his isn't even a Pro. So there's some reason to believe that Apple doesn't have the cooling stuff licked for stuff stuck to the back of a monitor, even if it is not really hot stuff like this. So I think it is reasonable to be concerned, given the recent history about this. And, and just worried. Like, we don't know. We'll find out, right? But here's the problem with this is the only real way to find out is to be like me and be like, I'm not going to buy one of these for the first 2 years just to find out what the deal is. But you can't do that. If you want one on day one, you kind of have to pull the trigger and say whether, like, are you going to buy it or are you not going to buy it? And that's where the worry comes in, because you won't have time. If you're going to buy it when it comes out within the first month or two, you won't have time to see in 6 months, does everyone fire all their GPUs or not? So you just kind of got to cross your fingers or, be prepared to sell it to somebody else or, do what Marco's going to do, which may end up working out, which is Marco gets the computer. He stresses all the CPU cores, encoding MP3s and compiling stuff. And then he passes off to Tiff, and she stresses the GPU, but leaves the CPU alone because she's just playing games on it.
Mm-hmm. And doing Photoshop stuff, which is also all GPU stuff.
Yeah. So you'll spread the heat. So you get a splotch on one side of the screen and then a splotch on the other.
It'll even out over time. Yeah, I really hope that it's good, because all the reviews are very, very positive. And these are still, these are very early reviews, but they're very promising in quite how universally positive they are. And man, Skylake Xeons are awesome according to these reviews. Like, this is a big deal on the processor front, because the 10-core version that they've seeded the reviewers seems to have 10 cores without a significant single-core performance penalty. Like in the previous generation,
there was a little penalty. It was a little bit slower than.
Like it's slightly slower single core than the newest iMac at the top spec, but barely. and it's obviously way faster and multi-threaded. And so, like,
yeah, the real promise is supposedly that the 18 also doesn't take a small, because it used to be like, yeah, you take a little hit, but then when you go up to whatever the maximum core count is, you take a pretty significant hit in a single core. And so the theory with these is that the 10 core takes a little hit, the 18 core will be similar performance to the 10 core and single threaded. So it's like you don't have to make this horrible choice between, well, if I want awesome performance in my parallel tasks, I have to give up in single threaded. You just give up a tiny bit, and it doesn't get worse as you go up in core. We'll see if that's true, but that's the pitch.
The main concerns for most people here when they see this are price and lack of upgradability, and those are very valid concerns. But it's a very, very good value for what you get for workstation parts. Like, a lot of people look at the Pro line, as John said earlier, because they want like a really good GPU for gaming, say. But that's never been what the Mac Pro has been very good at. You could do that with it, but it was a pretty inefficient way to do that, price wise, and sometimes even performance wise. You can get like GPUs that are pretty decent for gaming, but that's not why they're selling them here, and they don't expect people to buy it for that reason. And when you compare it to the price of just building a gaming PC, which John should have done years ago, it's not even close. And PC people and Mac people who just want to play games look at this and say, look, I could build a gaming PC for way less money. And that's true, but you wouldn't put a Xeon in it. And you wouldn't have like a wonderful Apple 5K display in front of it. And you wouldn't have ECC RAM and workstation class other stuff. And like the workstation class SSD, like you wouldn't have all that stuff. So when you actually go to like Dell or HP or somebody and spec out workstation grade components in a workstation that match the components in this, that are actually like a Xeon with the same core count and a workstation GPU and workstation grade SSD that's super fast, if you can even get them to give you one, it's actually pretty competitively priced from what we know so far. Again, we don't know the pricing of the upgrades yet, but like the base price and what you get in the base model, that's actually pretty reasonably priced, it seems. If you are looking at, and if you spec up an iMac, as I said, like if you spec up a regular iMac into this territory of performance and capacity and everything, you're already getting to about 4,000. So to get like, double the cores for 5,000 is not unreasonable, I don't think, in addition to all the other upgrades. So value, I think, from what we know so far, it's probably fine. Lack of upgradability is a big thing, but I think this is just the era in which we live now. I think the reality, our laptops, again, haven't been upgradable for years, for 5 years for most people. Like, they haven't been upgradable meaningfully, if at all. And this is just the world we live in now. The reality is upgrades have been getting fewer and fewer. They've been getting increasingly problematic, like Casey has with his RAM, because as things get super advanced, they also tend to get more picky and more specialized, and it's harder to find and make third-party stuff that actually works. Look how long it takes people to make third-party things for like the custom Apple SSD modules in a lot of the laptops and many of the recent desktops. So like it's just things are getting more advanced, more specialized, more integrated. So I think the era of upgradability is really pretty much over for most computer things. And I say this not happily, because I always did that. I participated very heavily in that. I would always buy my laptops with like base configuration and then spec them up with third-party parts to save money and to get, bigger capacities and stuff, and upgrade down the road with an SSD to make it faster and everything. And that was a great time for a long time, but I think the time is over. The technology has moved on, the market has moved on, and I think very few people really even would do that anymore, even if they could. And additionally, now you can't. So it kind of closes the door on that. And I think rather than hoping to go back to the time where you could buy John's Mac Pro in 2008 and keep it running all this time with just occasional upgrades of relatively inexpensive parts, we're not going back to that time. We can't. Like, the parts now are too specialized, too good. Even John's computer, you could never upgrade the processors. You could never upgrade the motherboard and make it, faster bus or anything. You just can't do that.
Can't you do the CPUs in mine? I think you can.
Well, you can, but only within a range of like the 3 that were available at that time. Like, you can't put in a new Xeon into your motherboard. Intel changes the socket like every 2 years.
Yeah, there was a long stretch though where they kept the socket the same. It's not my model year, I think. Well, maybe actually it was a 2009. Someone recently posted a YouTube video. I think they were doing a 2009, and they just upgraded the heck out of it to basically the fastest CPUs that still fit in the socket and all the other stuff fast. And it wasn't super impressive, but it was pretty neat. It was mostly interesting just to watch exactly what it takes to do that. If I can find the link, I'll throw it in the notes. But yeah, you're right. Like eventually they change the socket and then you're out of that business.
Or even just like, the new ones require a certain type of bus speed or RAM type or North Bridge that yours doesn't have. Like stuff like that. Like there's always like the requirements change even if the socket doesn't change. Usually you can't meaningfully upgrade your processor after it's being sold, And so like the era of upgradability has been fading for a long time. And I think it's very well over now. It's very, very clearly over. And so rather than hoping to go back to a time that we're never going to go back to, a more productive approach now would just be like, figure out how to operate in this new environment. So, and base your purchases accordingly. So, if you're concerned about running the same computer for 10 years, well, you're going to take a big risk on that. It might break after year 5 and require a repair that is going to be more than it's worth, or it won't even be available anymore. So, like, my approach to this is I have just gotten accustomed to selling computers after 3 years of using them, or sometimes less. I buy Apple Care if I'm concerned about service costs. I don't buy it on phones, as I mentioned, because that's not for me, but for Macs, I sometimes do buy, depending on pricing and concerns at the time. Once a Mac is out of Apple Care coverage, I don't want it anymore. So I try to sell it before that. It is currently I'm using my iMac that just left its warranty, and this is very unusual for me. I don't usually do this. But the new world where nothing is upgradable might require you to either buy less perfect and less expensive gear more frequently than you used to, and or get used to selling it, which is not great. It's not fun, and it's not particularly profitable. but like, you don't have to run everything into the ground necessarily. If you want super high-end stuff, the old way was buy something high-end and then just upgrade it every 18 months, until something better came out that you could upgrade the whole thing to. The new way is you can't do that anymore. You can just buy something new every 3 years or 2 years or 4 years and sell the old one while it's still worth something. This isn't a great solution for everybody, but we don't have any choice. Like, the world of upgradability is gone for Macs and even many PCs. So that world is beyond us now. So it's worth, rather than dwelling on this too much and trying to fight this fight forever, it's worth just figuring out, like, how can you operate in the new world?
It's coming back for the Mac Pro, though, even if it's just GPU upgradability. I'm holding that hope.
We still don't know anything about the Mac Pro.
And I want to emphasize the GPU. It's not just important for me. Like, the GPU is I think the most critical, just because GPUs get so much better year over year because of the inherent parallelism of their task, that all they can basically, as soon as there's a shrink, they can fit more execution units, and because the problem is so parallel, like, you actually get a win for that. So they are still on that crazy path where, year after year, they get faster, roughly in pace with transistor density. There's a little bit of a problem with RAM and bandwidth and stuff like that, but in general, their speed increases year over year are so big that if you are not on that train, if you can't participate in that train, and you're doing something that is GPU intensive, even if it's not gaming, whatever it may be, something GPU intensive involving video or whatever, it's like you have to throw out the whole machine, because eventually, 2 years later, the GPUs are 4 times as fast, and you're just left in the dust. So you have to be able to upgrade the GPU. So please, Apple, make a machine where you can upgrade the GPU. Just one, make it really expensive, but yeah, you got to do it, please.
I'll just point out that when Apple had the Mac Pro roundtable and they announced that a new Mac Pro will exist sometime not in 2017, they never said upgradable. They said modular.
I know.
That's a very different thing.
I'm just hoping. I'm just holding out hope. It's not founded on anything other than than just process of elimination of, like, how could you differentiate it from the iMac Pro? The screen will be separate. So that's the modular part, right? Also, it could be upgradable. It could some part of it.
I'm trying to get my hopes up, because this is still Apple, and modern Apple at that. And so, like, the chances of it being that upgradable, if at all, I would not consider that a sure thing. Like, if you're looking at the iMac Pro and you're thinking, oh, I want to hold out for the Mac Pro because it'll be upgradable, I would not consider that a safe assumption. It might be upgradable, but modular simply means, like, you will probably be able to configure it with lots of different configurations up front. Like the iMac Pro comes with one CPU and one GPU, and they're both, within a certain range of options here. Maybe the Mac Pro will let you pick 2 CPUs or 2 GPUs or 1 CPU and 3 GPUs. I don't know. Like that's modular. It doesn't mean any of this stuff is upgradable necessarily. It might be upgradable, but we have no indication that it will be. And I would certainly not bet on it. But anyway, the other point is that with the Mac Pro, we don't actually know when it's coming. All Apple said was not in 2017. It might be 2018.
It could arrive the first day of 2018. So as soon as 2017 ends, any day could be Mac Pro Day.
Yeah, New Year's Day.
God help
For
me.
the next decade, any day could be Mac Pro Day.
Yeah, or it could come out in 2025.
Yep.
Or it could come out never. They could just change their mind and say, you know what, actually, we're not going to do it anymore. Like, it's not even a sure thing that's going to exist.
But what it means is that every day you wake up in 2018 and later could be Mac Pro Day.
This is like Casey's doom. Like, worrying every week that the Mac Pro will be announced and released.
But realistically speaking, we know it's like we're all waiting for WWDC, and if they miss next year, then we're waiting for next year's WWDC. So we do have some thing to hang our hat on.
Yeah, but like the Mac Pro could come New Year's Day, or it could come in June, or it could come in December, or it could come in 2019. Like, so for anybody deciding whether to buy an iMac Pro, if you're at all on the fence about whether you might want a Mac Pro instead,
yeah, just buy it and sell it like Marco.
Well, yeah, because it's like you don't really know when that's coming, or even again, you don't even really know if the Mac Pro is coming. Like, yes, Apple said they're working on it, but things could change over time. You never know. Like, until it's actually out, you can't guarantee that it will be available. Like, you can't guarantee this thing will exist. And because we don't know anything about it, or even when or if it's coming out, then I think if you are really tempted by the iMac Pro, and you're not patient, and you need to buy something soon, and you really can't wait until June just to see if it comes out by then this isn't a bad option. I have a feeling, my prediction here of what's going to happen here. The iMac Pro is probably going to be so good, and it's probably going to satisfy so many Pro needs, that when the Mac Pro does finally come out, it's going to sell really badly. And then Apple will use that as justification to really finally kill it. I expect the next Mac Pro to be a single release product line. I don't expect it to ever get another update after its initial release, because I don't think it's going to sell well. And I say that not happily, because I want that computer, but the iMac Pro, I think, is going to solve so many Pro needs for so many people, possibly even me. It's going to be good enough. It's also like, and the timing of this is also going to exacerbate this, where people who have been dying for a high-end Mac Pro update for the last 3 years, they're going to be like a lot of that demand is going to go to the iMac Pro simply because it's out first. And so then when the Mac Pro comes out with probably the same generation components, at least the same generation processors, maybe GPUs will have a small update by then, but like when the Mac Pro comes out, say in 6 months, with the same generation stuff at a higher price point, after so many people have had 6 months to just buy the iMac instead, I really don't think it's going to sell very well.
Well, the 8K screen will be a big draw.
That we'll have to see. Honestly, like I do wonder, like if they're going to do an 8K screen, because all they said was they're doing a Pro display. They didn't say what size or anything about
I'm
it.
more optimistic about upgradable GPUs than I am about the 8K screen, but we'll see.
Yeah. So, but like we don't. So all this is to say, like, if you're thinking about buying this, but you are making an assumption about the next Mac Pro, really question that assumption. Like, are you really like? First of all, can you just wait and see? If you can wait and see, wait and see. But you don't know how long that wait's going to be. and then secondly, like, is what you're waiting for actually going to happen? Do we actually know that? Is it likely to happen? Have they said anything about it? Like, and chances are the answer to all those things is we don't know or no. Ultimately, I have a feeling this is the new Mac Pro in practice. Like, whether they release something next summer that nobody buys or not, that's a different story. But I think we're going to look back on this point in Apple history when we're all even older men in in a few years on this podcast, hopefully, talking about, remember when the iMac Pro came out and when the Mac Pro became an iMac, basically. Like, I think this is the new line of Mac Pros for the long term.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
It might not be.
We have a lot more to discuss about this, but we have gone long, and we have an interesting holiday schedule coming up very, very soon. So I think we should probably just stop here. And we will talk next week about the press tour with this, and we'll talk next week about the new interesting hardware and encryption sort of things. What is it, the T2 chip? Is that right?
And there's all sorts of cool stuff in there.
Yeah, so we have plenty more to say, and as much as I joke, I'm actually pretty interested to talk about some of this stuff, so we will save that for next week.
Thank you to our sponsors this week, Betterment, Hover, and Fracture, and we will see you next week.
Now the show is over, they didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
So, Casey, do you want us to talk even more about the Mac Pro?
About the Mac Pro, no. About the iMac Pro, whatever, that's fine.
If you look at, what this iMac Pro is versus what the 2013 Mac Pro was, and technically still is, this is a Mac Pro. It just happens to have a screen glued to the front of it. But, it's really no less upgradable than the 2013 Mac Pro was. It's way faster in every way. It has more options, bigger, and it supports desktop Retina correctly.
I think RAM and SSD upgrade. I think it's not really more RAM and SSD upgrade. That's a lot. It was so easy to take. It was so easy to take the top off the trash can. It comes right off. Just a little comes right off, and right there in front of you, totally reachable, is the SSD and the RAM. That's a big.
Was
deal.
the SSD actually? Does OWC sell one?
Pretty sure it was just on the outside of one of the boards. You can just yank it out of the slot, put another one in.
Let's see. Oh yeah, they do sell one. Yeah, Mac Pro 2013.
At this point, I would do that for my wife's iMac. I wish I could upgrade the SSD right now because I would pay for a 2 terabyte one.
It's $1,200 for 2
terabyte SSD. Yeah. Well, I would buy a third party one, obviously.
No, this is third party. This is from OWC.
That's for the Mac Pro though. I'm assuming it's not the same thing in the iMac.
No, you're right. In the iMac, it's probably different. But anyway, for all intents and purposes, if Apple came out and said, "This is the Mac Pro now," if they didn't pre-announce the existence of a new modular one next year or not this year, we would grumble for a few weeks about how it wasn't upgradable.
I would grumble forever.
Yeah, I was going to say a few weeks.
You know why I would grumble forever?
You're going to grumble forever no matter what they release.
No. The reason I would grumble forever doesn't have anything to do with almost anything we discussed except for one part: the fact that things might be downclocked. Because the whole point of the top line of the computer is to be the fastest it can be, and so don't take the world's fastest parts and then downclock them. Right? That's the biggest thing. You need to have a world's fastest Mac that is not intentionally hobbled by some stupidity. Now, if they change the iMac Pro to not do that and to run all the parts at their maximum speed to get the highest binned parts from all the manufacturers, right, and run them at their high binned speed, then yeah, I would be less grumbly. But if this specific one with its rumored downclock parts, that cannot be your top of the line computer because it's like this is our top of the line car. It's it's the Acura NSX, right? But we've detuned the engine by putting a restrictive exhaust on it, so we've cut off 100 horsepower that's just sitting there. What are you even doing?
But you could make that argument for everything, though. You can make that argument for any car. Every freaking car is an aftermarket exhaust.
Okay, yeah, car's a bad example, but for silicon parts, like they're bin to a certain clock speed, and the more expensive ones are the ones that can go faster, right? And to not run them at their top speed, or to buy slower speed chips because you can't cool them, you've made a bad top-end computer then. Like, you're leaving money on the table. Like, you're charging enough money that you could put in the top bin part, but instead you buy the slower one. Or worse, you buy the top bin one, but don't run it at its maximum clock speed. That is just an embarrassment. You can't do that. You got to have a fastest computer with all the fastest stuff. That's the whole point of the top of your line, is to be the top of your line.
I think you're getting a little overly worked up. If some GPU was running at 90% of its maximum capacity, who cares?
What do you leave that 10% there for?
Who cares? It's still infinitely better.
The people who want the very fastest computer and are willing to pay for it. That's who cares.
That is, but by definition, John, that is the fastest computer. This is all bull because it's hypothetical, but like in this hypothetical world, that is the fastest computer that Apple sells. There is no other discussion to be had.
Yeah, I know, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like it's like saying whatever Mac, Apple. If the fastest computer they sold was the Adorable, it's like, but that is the fastest. You would know that it is possible to make a faster one by doing obvious things, right?
You enjoy your PC then? Like, what do you?
No, I'm with John on this. Like, because the role of it is to be the top.
Haven't you read my case for the true Mac Pro successor? Like, this is the whole point of your top of the line computer, right?
I mean, I'm not arguing that there should be a top-of-the-line computer. I'm not arguing that it should be really damn fast. But if you're worried about a processor being 4 gigahertz instead of 4.1, like, who cares? It's still
people who buy this computer care. That's who cares. Like, and it's because I'm not saying like, oh, you have to do something magical to make it faster than everybody else. But like, don't take a part that runs at 4.1 and run it at 4. Why? Like, why? Oh, we had to do that to fit into the thermal envelope, and it gets back to what Marco and I were talking about. Who's asking you to fit it in a skinny case versus who is asking you to get the fastest everyone can buy? People buy whole new computers for a 10% speed bump to things that they do, right? They say, my computer is too slow. If I get 10 to 20% improvement on this, it makes a difference in my workday, in my compile cycle, in my render time, in my whatever, right? They'll buy a whole new computer for a double-digit percentage speed increase. And you're saying I'm willing to leave double-digit speed increase on the table so I can fit it into a skinny case that's no one's asking for. So that's why I'm saying I would grumble forever about this, because it is a wrong-headed thing to say we're going to make the fastest computer we can for our most demanding users, but we're going to do a super obvious thing that makes it slower in some small way.
Well, but so
you keep asking who cares, and I'm telling you who cares. You don't care, but I care.